We have started learning about C# on a console application. We have learned about methods and we have learned about variables and scope. With this knowledge, we have a challenge for you. You have to create 3 new methods, one that will be able to subtract 2 values, another one that will multiply 2 values, and another one that will divide the values. You will have to call these 3 methods in addition to the add method and display the return values in different lines, and you will have to use class level variables so all of the methods always use the same values. Meaning that, for example, the add method is going to add these values, but all of the other methods should use the exact same values to perform their operations. Pause the video and add this functionality. Once you are ready, you can return to the video to check out how we solved it, or if you couldn't solve it, you can always return to this video and check out the solution. Okay, so here is the solution. The first thing that we need to do is define the class level variables, and we have them already. But the next thing that we have to do is use these variables in all the 4 methods that we need. In this case, since we already have the variables in here, we don't really need to receive them inside of each method. So I am going to delete that definition so the method no longer asks for values, and so I don't need to pass any values inside here. The method will just be working with the class level variables. The next thing that we need is to define the other 3 methods. I'll start by defining the one that subtracts values. Remember that this has to be static in order to be used from the main static method, and it will also be an integer. The name of this method is going to be subtract. It is also not going to be receiving any values, and it is simply going to return n1 minus n2. I am not defining any variable in here, but remember that this also works. It is just not going to be defining any variables. It's going to be returning the value immediately. The multiply method is going to also be private, has to be static, is going to be an integer, and is going to be called multiply. Again, this is not going to be receiving any values, and it's going to be returning n1 times n2. And finally, let's define a new private static int method that is going to be divide. Not going to receive any values, and it's going to return n1 divided by n2. And so we have all of the 4 methods that we need. The final thing that we have to do is call them from the main method. We can optionally define the variables. For example, define the addition to be equal to whatever the add method is doing, then define the subtraction to be equal to the call of the method subtract, then define the multiplication, which is going to be equal to whatever the multiply method returns, and finally define the division, which is going to be equal to whatever the divide method returns. Once we have the variables, we can call the console.writeLine method and pass the value of these variables, starting with the addition and moving into the other variables. In this case, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And so the functionality is ready. I'm going to get rid of this first line. We no longer need to be greeting the world, and I'm going to execute the application. Remember that on Windows you do need this read line to be able to see the results. Let's take a look at them. So here they are. First the addition, then the subtraction, the multiplication, and the division. Now notice something. The division is being set to 0. The division actually should return about 0.8, but remember that right now all of these values are integers, and an integer doesn't have decimal values. That is why we're only seeing 0. As a bonus, you could have changed this definition to be another type, which is the float type. If we use the float type, now the values can actually have decimal points. Now, because we are changing the type of our variables, when using them, the result is going to be a float value. And we cannot assign a float value to an integer value. So we would have to change the definition of our methods as well. And in the case of the add method, because we are assigning this to a variable, we need to change the type of the variable to which we are assigning the value to. And so if we change the definition of all of our methods to vFloats and we run the application again, we now see that the result of the division now displays the entire value. The first three values still don't have decimal values because the operation returns integer values, but the division now displays the decimal values and not just 0. So this is the solution for the challenge. We have defined methods, we have defined variables, we have called the methods, and we have used the variables in their different scopes. In the next lecture, we're going to start taking a look at classes and namespaces.